I just got this wood. It's rough, it's cracked. I just don't even know what to do with it. How do I make it look? How are we going to do that? All right, I'm going to talk you through milling. In case you don't understand milling, let's walk through each step. It's one of the first things you should learn as a hobbyist woodworker who's taking this maybe a little bit more seriously, because it's going to allow you to do a lot of custom things. So it's always really good to start with a plan. You can just hand sketch that. I've done that. It works really well, especially for simple projects. For some bigger projects, it's really helpful to have some kind of design software. I've seen people use Fusion 360, which is free, I believe. I use SketchUp. With SketchUp, you get what's called Open Cut List. You can install it, it's free. And Open Cut List, the really nice thing is it gives you your full plan, and it tells you exactly what your cuts will be so that you have more accuracy in your milling process and you can think through exactly what you need to cut as well as what you need to buy, so you're not left with a whole bunch of leftovers, although that's kind of nice sometimes, but you're not wasteful in that process. So when you're milling, the first step is really to flatten one side. That's your whole goal. Now there's a lot of different ways to do that. The preferred method is to start with a jointer. Again, you can do a lot of things. For a long time, when I didn't have a jointer, I would use a planer, and it's called skip planing, and that's where you basically run a piece through, you flip it over, you run it again. Other people have really cool designs for sleds that will allow you to flatten one side of it, and you put it through the planer, and it perfectly flattens the other. So is a jointer required? No. But what's nice about a jointer is it's going to flatten that one side without problem, and then you can also flatten an edge. Once you have the edge flattened and the bottom flattened, then you can take it to the planer and make sure it's coplanar on the wood, meaning that this side is just as flat as this side. And then because you have a flat edge, because you've used the jointer, you can now go to the table saw and rip the other edge. That's really all there is to it. It can be complex. There are a lot of tips and tricks on how to make things perfect if your machines aren't dialed in perfectly. I'll leave you to the other videos for that. Take a piece of chalk, white chalk, whatever color is kind of the opposite of your wood, and then just mark up your wood. It will come off in the milling process, so don't stress about that. You can go everywhere with it. What this is going to do is tell you if you actually have a flat surface or if there's any dips or grooves or anything that are going to cause problems. So the more chalk you use, and you don't have to go crazy, I just dropped my chalk, but it will allow you to see if it's fully planed yet. Oftentimes, once you get used to milling, you can tell, you can see if something's not level, but this is a great way when you're starting out. All right, so we've chalked up our board. Let's run it through and see if we can find that perfectly flat side. As you run your board through, make sure to apply even pressure, and I would really recommend getting some of these paddles. They're typically something that comes with something like a jointer, but then once you've run it through on one side, you can now place that flattened side against the fence to get that edge nice and flat and hopefully 90 degrees from that top plane. All right, so now that we have milled this, this should be flat as grandma's flapjacks, and this side should also be flat. So we have a bottom face that's flat, a side that's flat. We can use a little square and then check it for being 90. And that looks really good. I'm very happy with that. Now, if it's off a little bit, if it's 89.8 degrees or something like that, don't panic. That's something early on when you're in woodworking and you're worried about it being perfect because you see people on YouTube getting these perfect cuts. It doesn't have to be. There's actually little tricks, especially if you have a jointer, where when you're putting two faces together, if you're making a board, you can just do them in opposite ways and you will get a perfectly flat board and a perfect seam between the two. What we're gonna do next is we're going to do the same thing. We're gonna mark this face with chalk, and then we're gonna mark this side with chalk, and we're gonna go over to the planer and plane this so that it's perfectly coplanar with this side. Now we're here at the planer. This is a great little planer. You can get it from a big box store. It doesn't set you back too much, and I know when I first started, I got a lunchbox planer, they call them. It's the taller one. DeWalt also has one of those. And I would just suggest if you can spend a little bit more money, get this one. This is still a far cry from buying a really expensive standalone planer, but with a helical head insert that I added to it, It works really well, and I've been really happy with it. And the biggest benefit when you're milling and you're just learning this to start is you will get a really nice cut that allows your board to be coplanar. So we started at the jointer, we worked on it there. Now we're gonna cut this side as well, but that's what the planar's for. This one's excellent, so let's get to some planing. There you go, the planer did its job. If you are new to woodworking and you've just broken out your planer, and maybe you're watching this because you're wanting to make sure you know how to mill stuff, this thing does such a magical job. It's one of my favorite tools when you put rough lumber through and it comes out and it's nice and clean and it's parallel with that other side. It is very satisfying to look at. Now the last thing we have to do is take the one side that we used on the jointer to make sure that was nice and clean, and we're gonna make that parallel with the other side. And we're gonna do that at the table saw with a ripping blade. We're gonna put it through and make that perfectly clean. Now you might have noticed when I held it up to the camera there that there are some kind of marks from the blades on here, and it's not perfectly clean, and that's okay because we're gonna ultimately sand whatever it is we build in the long run. I could do some finishing passes here to make that a little bit better, but I'm actually waiting because I need to do about 12 others of these for the tabletops, and I want to do those all at once because the more you can batch stuff out, the fewer problems you're going to have when you're going to put it together because they're all going to be that consistent thickness. The last step in your milling is taking it over to the table saw and ripping it down with some kind of ripping blade. You can also have a planing blade, and you can cut that parallel to this side, which we jointed. If the face is flat and this side is flat, now when we run it through, we're gonna get a 90-degree cut. And there you go. That is how you go from a rough cut board through the milling process to have a nice coplanar piece of wood that you can now use to build whatever you need to. You can save a lot of money milling your own stock, but you do need some tools. There are clever ways to get away with things. I would also say though, having the right tools makes things not only more efficient, but safer. Hope you have fun in the shop.